I am the reason for his madness. The star-made night stood above the Fire King's corpse, splayed and split on granite steps. In his hand of killing light, he held Hadhul's spine, calling out to the feathered myrrh of Kaetar. Feet shifted in the damp jungle ground, beads rattled and murmurs blew like wind through the crowds, an anxious flock ready to take flight. The Whitestrake shouted once more, daring any challenger to step forward, and when nervous clattering was the only response, he screamed in the voice of a god. He swung his blood-stained mace and pelted it against a column, sending cracks webbing through the marbled stone. Our tormentors ran, their welkined blue eyes shedding tears of terror, swallowed with the same fear that had consumed me as a child. I want to say that I dreamt of a day such as this, but I had not. My younger years were nothing but misery, an endless nightmare, devoid of all hope. I did not wish, I did not yearn. I was a husk, an instrument played in the bloodiest song ever sung to Sirid. This is how it was until he came, Pelinal, the star-made night, the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. My name had always stung, spoken from the curled lips of elven slave masters, yet when he used it, I heard music, a divine melody that pulled my eyes to his. Huna. I could not look away. This I thought was the magnetism of the Et Arda, but later when I saw the son of Kain, I knew Pelinal to be different. Do not mistake my words for heresy. Morahouse, first breath of man, was truly a sight to behold, both majestic and mighty, truth made solid, yet his eyes did not make me love him as Pelinal's did. I suppose this love of Whitestrake was not unique to myself. All men loved Pelinal, for he was the manifest rage of man, heartless so that no step toward freedom would seem too cruel. This is what was said by tale-tellers, but I knew otherwise. When he took me to his tent and removed his armor, to love me as a woman, I saw he was man. I felt him, breathed him in, heard his beating heart as I lay my head on his chest. He was a man, and I loved him as such. He had found me a grain slave, weak and ailing, yet somehow, like a master sculptor, he made the standard sublime, and I became a hoplite, serving in the armies of Alesh. Pelinal, my guiding star, he brought out in me the flame once dampened by birth into bondage. He fought for me. He tore the neck of Haramir for me. He smashed the head of Gordhauer for me. He pulled the spine of Hadhul for me. When he loved me after in his tent, he would trace the lashed scars of my back, asking me of how each was made. I fed him memories of my pain, whetting his bloodlust like a hound starved of flesh. This was the rage he took and placed upon the skin of our enemies. He would return, often wearing death, white hair soaked red. I washed him, taking tarnish from a star, unveiling his brilliance which shone upon me, and only me. For what reason I did not, could not know, but he did love only me. One day in the thick of rain, thundernacks and risen wights had been sent against our camp at dusk. They were horrors we had seen many times over. Morahouse tore rotted flesh with horn and breathed in storms of the Daedra. I fought in phalanx formation, protecting our queen. They had struck here to end the war, but our shields and spears of bloodied bronze defended our dream. As the tides turned, my love, Pelinal, brazen knight of Shore's fury, gave chase to the sorcerers who brought them. We had won another day, yet creatures of cunning the Aelids turned to be. From the river Niben, volleys of arrows pricked at our ranks, leaving the ground draped in ribbons of leather and flesh. I thought of my Pelinal then, his courage and fearless will, and so I broke formation and let loose my spear wailing into the distance, striking one of their archers into the river. The men beside me cheered and did the same. Our enemies peeled from the boat into the waters below, yet one stood in defiance. Tall and lithe, in a sleeveless lilac dress with a chest-plate made of golden feathered mail, his head adorned with the colours of the jungle birds. Calethalel the singer was his name, and it was with the string he had skill, harp, lyre, or bow. Calethalel drew back his taloned hand, readying his weapon nearly as tall as he. The last moment my mortal eyes would see was the flash of silver that strung from his distant figure. I could not breathe, my lungs a well of blood bubbling with air. I lay back in the mud, as redness fountained around the arrow lodged in my throat. I was dead within seconds, yet my soul remained tethered. Burial was my right, and I had to see his eyes once more. The winged Bull Morra House shouted their boat to splinters, and the men cheered in victory. Soon, though, a crowd formed around my corpse. Alesh knew who I was, her face pallid and eyes fearful. She could not stop him. Pelinal Whitestrake emerged from the jungle, carrying the heads of his hunt. He threw them into the center of camp, ready to bathe in admiration. Silence. He darted his eyes from man to man, each who bowed his head and averted his gaze. He called out, "Huna!" No word, nor movement, only silence. He knew, but could not accept. "Huna!" he shouted. An echo ran through the sky. He barged through the crowd to the tent of Alesh. She moved to him, hand to chest, praying that he would calm, yet he pushed her aside and came to where I lay upon a table. My star-made knight shone upon me for one last time. His face had now eclipsed with rage. From this day forth, Pelinal wore death, and only death. His beating heart torn in two, replaced by a gaping chest filled with a diamond-soaked red, singing like a mindless dragon. He wrought destruction from Narlame all the way to Keladil, and erased those lands from the maps of elves and men and all things in them. I want to say this made me sad, but it did not, because he did this for me. I am the reason for his madness.